Well, the terror group ISIS-K has claimed the responsibility for the two blasts which killed over 100 people and injured 150 others outside the Kabul airports. 13 U.S. soldiers were among the victims, as most were Afghan civilians seeking evacuation. How will this affect this ongoing withdrawal, as the August 31st deadline is only days away? Who is ISIS-K and what is their connection, if any, to the Taliban? And how is the Taliban reacting to the attack? To find out these answers, I'm joined today by Ismaila Abusin, our correspondent in Kabul, Yang Xiyu, Senior Fellow of China Institute of International Studies, Muhammad Amir Rana, Director of Pakistan Institute for Peace Studies, and Peter Kuznick, Professor of History in American University. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qingduo. First, Ismaila, tell us what is the situation like in the wake of these two blasts? Are people coming down? Are people feel safe to go out?
Hello, Shandua. People are afraid, totally frightened, and the situation is now entering another era of a bloody future when ISKP can do such big attack among the people, when there are Taliban controlling it there, when there are US and other coalition forces controlling the area, and they could find a way to explode themselves and finally killed more than 250 people are injured. That's a catastrophe and another fear for the people of Afghanistan that erupting now. Daesh, when it comes to ISKP, they announced themselves as a part of ISIS, which was a part of Iraq and Syria. Now, after 2014, they erupted in Afghanistan, and the former government was rejecting that. There is no Daesh in Afghanistan. Finally, one of the provincial police chief, when I was talking at mid of 2014, he said that there are people coming out with their vehicles and their language are different. They got their children and there are women with them in Zabul province, and that person was removed from his position by former government. And then Achin and northern Nangarhar province was a district where the Daesh erupted, and finally now it's doing all these things. They have committed a lot of very bloody attacks in Kabul, including one in Kabul hospital and 6 district. So this is something very horrible, and people are afraid of this, and they see Daesh now as another game regarding Afghanistan.
Tell me, are people, somehow, surprised to see that now Taliban is in control, but somehow there's a terror attack? Obviously, this is not only targeting the Americans, but also is like a warning to Taliban for their cooperation, as they said. What is the response from Taliban officials?
Well, the Taliban said that they will not let any group operate in Afghanistan, and they will do their best and their own measures to avoid any kind of interruption. And they've already pledged United States of America and Doha Agreement that they will not allow any group or individuals to use Afghanistan soil against US and their allies and other neighboring countries. And they are making sure about these things. But Daesh is now, after Thursday evening attack, seems to be something very complex now for Afghanistan. And that was complex. The biggest bomb of the United States was used in Achin district, and now the Taliban were also fighting against ISIS. The U.S. was also claiming they are fighting against ISIS-KP in Afghanistan, and the ANDSF and former government was always also claiming. But the IS-KP seems to be a foe to the Taliban, and Taliban say they will fight against them, they will varnish them, and they will never let them do any acts. But after Thursday evening, the concerns are emerging, though the Taliban say they're assured they will control the situation and they will elevate Daesh or any other group who are doing terrorist attacks in the country.
So are the Taliban, taking any extra measures to increase the security situation, or are they capable of, gathering the necessary intelligence, detecting the terrorist, suspects and preventing further terror attacks?
Well, that's a question. Like Taliban, it's now 12th day they have captured Kabul. They have just announced the names of their officials for Afghanistan National Defense Secretariat and NDS, the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Interior, and elsewhere, all around the Kabul in district and also in provincial level. Their chiefs and their commanders are doing things, but it's a shattered situation. No government is on the stage in Afghanistan. A vacuum of power is also something could be discussed as of course, of a concern. And the Taliban just entered Kabul. Everything is new for them. They will have a lot of homework on this. When it comes to the intelligence, the Taliban whether claim they have their own intelligence and their own style of searching for all the individual and people, but again, after Thursday attacks, these all claims are looking very foggy and blurred because the Taliban were here. How could it happen? Whether they say like the U.S. should bear the responsibility for this because it was their area. They were doing the security measures in Kabul Abbey Gate airport. So the Taliban now are struggling to establish their intelligence, and they will establish also and form inclusive government. That's a matter of time, and Taliban have to prove this, whether they can do it or not.
Well, Xiyu, back to our studio. Are you surprised to see the terror attacks, basically days away from the deadline of the U.S. withdrawal?
Yes, I was indeed shocked by the terror attack by two reasons. One, the complex of relation between internal forces of Afghanistan, and two, complex relation between Taliban and the United States. On the surface, the terror attack actually attack both on the U.S. and the Taliban, which has clearly committed to anti-terrorism. So in terms of anti-terrorism, Taliban and the U.S. should has relations of alignment, at least, if not coalition. However, the attack actually drove a wedge between U.S. and the Taliban. Now the very tricky question to U.S. and Taliban is, if Biden administration withdraw by end of this month, how U.S. can implement what they have declared to revenge on the ISK. If they do not, if they extend their stay there, how they meet the sort of red line with Taliban. So the situation is very complex between the two sides. And on the other hand, in terms of the situation of Kabul, in general, Taliban has captured Kabul as a whole, but that does not mean Taliban has controlled every corner of Kabul. So that means a lot of uncertainties remain ahead. Uncertainties, the security situation, uncertainties of the credibility of Taliban's commitments on anti-terror, uncertainties of the complicated relation between Taliban, terror, ISK, and US, and so on. So a lot of countless uncertainties waiting ahead.
Complex relationship over there. Let me bring in Professor Peter Kuznick here. Tell us, who is this ISIS-K, which claimed the responsibility for the bombing, for the blasts? As we were told by President Trump, former President Trump, he said once, ISIS was defeated completely. Seems it's not the case.
Well, ISIS's capabilities have been degraded, but ISIS is not defeated. ISIS-K, or ISIS Khorasan, really began in Pakistan and got to Afghanistan in 2015. At the peak, they had several thousand fighters in Afghanistan. Many of them came from the Taliban. This is a more extreme form of Islamic fundamentalism than even the Taliban. They felt that the Taliban was not strict enough. We know the Taliban, when they were in power in 1996 to 2001, the kinds of things they were doing, the treatment of women was medieval, the cutting off people's hands for crimes, the very strict, harsh Sharia law that they imposed was not even enough for the people in ISIS-K who are even more extreme. So they operate, we don't know how many. Trump's statement that they were defeated was obviously not correct and misleading. Mm-hmm. They function within Afghanistan and in Pakistan and a little bit else in the area, but they are an affiliate of ISIS. They don't put out their own releases, press releases and statements. They depend on the international ISIS spokespeople to do that for them. So they are an extreme radical version of a very extreme radical version of the Taliban, who are opposed to the Taliban as well as they are opposed to the United States.
Mm-hmm. Interestingly, exactly in their statement, basically they said this attack was against the U.S., also against the Taliban for their partnership with the U.S. military. But describe their relationship. Now Taliban basically is controlling the entire nation, and now you have ISIS-K. So how do you see their relationship? One Taliban official said, the violence will recede when the U.S. withdrawal is complete. Do you think so?
No, it's going to be very difficult for the Taliban to gain control. It's one thing to unite against the United States, to unite against the invader. But we know that there are many, many different factions within the Taliban, and then there are other extreme groups like ISIS-K who are opposed to the Taliban. So the Taliban is not going to have an easy time securing the country or creating stability, and which is part of, in some ways, means that the Taliban is going to be needing as much outside help as possible, which gives the United States and China and Russia and India and Pakistan more leverage. So it's possible that their need for outside support, financial, economic, and alliances is going to make the Taliban less extreme this time and less repressive than they were last time they were in power. At least that is the optimistic assessment. That's the hope that we have.
Very optimistic assessment, Xu, do you agree? And from Chinese perspective, China actually was, I would say, optimistic that now there's a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. Hopefully, stability and peace will prevail in the country. Then they can welcome investment and trade, development problem will follow. But now, with the latest explosion, do people still think it's secure enough to do business or to, cooperate on that level?
It's a very important question to Chinese. In my observation today and late yesterday, I find many Chinese friends has changed their analysis or thoughts of views about the vision of the future Afghanistan. Simply saying, many people used to keep cautious optimistic, not real at least cautious optimistic. Mm-hmm. However, the terror attack really wake up such people in China. Now we have two categories of issues: how to keep the stability and security there, and how to reconstructing the Afghanistan. Yeah. Now the later one is obviously pushed for the back. And the urgent issue, the immediate task, is how to control the situation from the threats or real attacking by the terrorists, especially from IS. And in this regard, I think the more important issue is for all related parties, US, China, Russia, Afghanistan, Taliban, and Pakistan, India, no matter how complicated differences among the countries, the common threats, common challenge, common task is contain and crack down the terrorist movement.
Terrorism, yes. Professor, Peter Kusniger here, how will this double explosion somehow impact the U.S. evacuation? And what will U.S. do as U.S. troops will withdraw in terms of taking revenge against those who attacked the U.S.?
It's interesting. If you look at the American media, there are a lot of generals on there. There are a lot of neoconservatives, some of the same people who got us involved in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya to begin with. And they're waving the bloody flag and calling for Biden to send in more troops and teach those Afghanis a lesson. So that the hawks, the militarists, are attacking Biden for being too weak and too soft. But that is not the sentiment of the American people. The American people are in shock right now because of the loss yesterday and the attack. But the American people have no appetite for more involvement in these wars that last for 20 years. So I don't think that this is going to change Biden's approach. What we're going to see is an ongoing effort to find the people who did this. And the United States will still have capabilities. We have drone capabilities to hit them. We have commandos who could go in there. The United States will still have intelligence. The United States still has allies who we've had in that country going back for decades. You have to remember the United States got involved initially back in the 1970s when the United States supported the Mujahideen against the Soviet Union. And one of the interesting things that's lost in this history is that the people the U.S. supported to begin with, the reason why they hated the Taraki Amin pro-Soviet government in Kabul back in 1978 and 1979 was because that government was educating women, because that government was industrializing, was modernizing, was doing land reform. And so the people we were in bed with to begin with are some of the same people who then turn into the Taliban, who then turn into Al-Qaeda, and we were involved in helping train them, the U.S. was, in the camps in Pakistan with money from Saudi Arabia. So we helped create the nightmare that we're now facing. We have to be smart this time and not extricate ourselves the way the U.S. did back in the 1990s that allowed the Taliban to take over in that country. We've got to figure out working with allies, and I hope the United States can work with China and Russia and India on this in order to create a stable situation in Afghanistan. I mean, you have to remember that Ashraf Ghani said just recently that 90% of Afghanis live on less than $2 a day. 90%. This is still a terribly impoverished country. When the U.S. got involved back in the 70s, the average life expectancy was 40%. 90% of the population was illiterate. This is a country that desperately needs outside aid, economic development, modernization, and we've got to work together as a global community to help stabilize the situation in Afghanistan, moderate the Taliban, make sure women do have equal rights there, and move forward and turn this backward area into a place that is part of the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of debate, obviously, inside the U.S. about the handling of the withdrawal, and the decision itself is controversial. For example, this top Republican senator pointed out, Mitch McConnell, terrorists will not stop fighting the U.S. just because our politicians grow tired of fighting them. He expressed the concern that the terrorists worldwide will be emboldened by U.S. retreat, by this attack, and by the establishment of a radical Islamic terror state in Afghanistan. What do you make of his statement, his remarks here?
Well, you can you can say many American politicians support or say yes to these remarks, but also it's easy to find many other American politicians say the opposite views or remarks, simply because now the United States has been at dilemma of Afghanistan. That means withdrawal or no withdrawal are both difficult for the United States. If they extend their stationing there, more troubles. If they withdraw quickly, more troubles either.
No easy choice.
No easy choice. In other words, each of choice means more troubles. So in short, during the past 20 years, U.S. has done a very stupid thing, say shooting one trouble by making more troubles. Now that is the second phase of more troubling period. That is the basic root for the dilemma of the United States. So how to exit of the dilemma by American its own? No way. They have to go sincerely to international multilateral cooperation, as I mentioned earlier, say real cooperation and coordination among all different parties, no matter how sharp differences among the parties, have effective cooperation to make the whole Afghanistan in stability and security. That is the only right way to seek for.
Well, we have Muhammad Amir Rana here. Rana, because the report said that there's intelligence cooperation between U.S. and Taliban. I mean, it's reasonable because they have a common enemy in ISIS-K. Do you think the cooperation will survive the evacuation and somehow probably lays the foundation for future cooperation, even the U.S. recognition at some point in the future of the Taliban government as a legitimate government, in Afghanistan here?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me in the dialogue. Of course, this is a very important question you are asking for, and there's many all around the world is watching that how much level of the cooperation the Taliban and the US have right now, and is there any probability that this collaboration will continue in the future? So far, this is the US-Taliban relationship has a very short past, and apart from the CIA chief secret meetings with the Taliban leadership, there is a very little has appeared so far about the nature and the characteristics of their partnership. But so far, I think this is the US priority is that how to complete the evacuation process and before the deadline. And second priority, of course, would be the ISK. Specifically now, it will become more critical challenge for the Biden administration. It was already under the pressure, internal pressure, and there was a lot of criticism was going on all across the world about his withdrawal policy. But after these casualties, I think he will have to rethink or to review his approaches towards Afghanistan. In that context, they may evolve a bit deeper ties with the Taliban, especially for the covert operation against IS or so-called the common enemies. So this is maybe another opportunity for the Taliban that they can get more legitimacy in Afghanistan and maybe get their image the better in international media and international context, which is already under the harsh criticism. So this is somehow we have to see how this collaboration will go in future. So it will have another win-win position for the Taliban, and maybe they is more than win-win for the Taliban. But the Taliban test has started now. This is one side is the collaboration for countering terrorism, but their real challenge is to govern the Afghanistan and to establish the consensus inclusive government in Afghanistan, and how these kind of the international collaboration will help them to evolve the consensus among the Afghan stakeholders. So far, this is they have the little history, but we will see that how it will go in near future.
Muhammad, you are from Pakistan. Now you stay in Turkey. So how do people, say, in Pakistan, in Turkey, see this, twin blasts? Are people surprised? What does it mean to Pakistan, for example?
I think it was already in the media, even in international media and as well in the Pakistani media, and they were anticipating that this is going to be a very critical moment because the whole media cameras' eyes were on the Kabul airport. When you have such kind of the hyperization of certain issues. So this create a very golden opportunity for the terrorist organizations like the Islamic State, and they have exploited it very well. So there was a very little attention of the international media about the other aspects in Afghanistan, about the future government, that what is happening in other parts of the country. Mainly, especially the Western media is focusing only on the two issues. One is evacuation of the translator and their own citizens, and on the other side, they are mainly focusing on what is going on in the Panjshir, where the anti-Taliban forces are gathered, and Taliban are trying to do some deal and to convince them that fight is over and this is the time for the negotiation and to move forward with
Yes.
consensus. Yeah.
So, if you look at this, 20 years the U.S. spent in Afghanistan, the original reason to basically launch the war against Afghanistan is to dethrone Taliban and to fight the Taliban, to fight the terrorism because of Al Qaeda, Bin Laden. But now the U.S. is leaving this country. Well, the terrorist attack just happened behind the back. What an irony! What do you make of this 20 years of the U.S. efforts? Basically, it's no progress at all. Now terrorism is still there.
Not only no progress at all, but also more troubles and more retreat development, negative development. For example, right before the terror attack yesterday, quite many Americans argues, at least the past 20 years, we have decreased the terrorist threats, and the latest attack really wake up such a dreaming arguments. And secondly, you mentioned the original purpose of Afghanistan war was designed to anti-terror. It's an important part of anti-terror by Bush administration, junior Bush administration. But gradually, it turned into the other purpose, say set up a democratic open regime in Afghanistan, and they input a lot of money on political, economic, military, and so on, and culture, and so on. And the anti-terror has been never important like before. And with failure of anti-terror goal and some other goals, finally, Trump administration determined to withdraw, and the Biden administration implement. So basically, in my view, during the past 2 decades, without constant purpose, constant strategy.
Even fulfilling the task of fighting terrorism. Yeah. With that, we're coming to the end of the show. Many thanks to our guests, Xiyu and Muhammad and Kuznik, and also thank you for watching. See you next time.